Tonight we gather. And if you thought about it, and you said to yourself, what is the one day that Jews come to synagogue? And I told you that the day that most Jews make sure they come to synagogue is not a day of feasting and of parties, but a day of fasting and of introspection and of confession and of repentance and of seeking to be better, then I would be telling you a very important secret about the Jewish people. Maybe you take it for granted that Yom Kippur is the day that we gather. But it says something about who we are and what we believe. That the one day that people, even those who the rest of the year do not come to the synagogue, the one day that they come is the day in which they promise to themselves and to God that in the year to come, they will grow their souls, they will care more, they will love more, they will seek to be better. Poem Nidre, page 204. By authority of the court on high, by authority of the court below, with divine consent and with the consent of the congregation, we are granted permission to pray together with those who have transgressed.
Vishiva shel mala, vishiva shel mata, al dat hamakom, el dat hagal, al matirin hitpalel im havaryanim. Vishiva shel mala, vishiva shel mata, al dat hamakom, el dat
Nidre, page 205.
Ikarat naveon.
Kol Nidre, chant of ages, chant of Israel, chant of sorrow, measuring off the throbbing heartbeats of a people bowed in anguish, crushed by tyrants, thwarted, broken, wandering, ever homeless, weary. Generations set your motif out of trials, hopes, and yearnings, added each its variations to your theme and to your cadence. Diverse lands and diverse times poured their soul into your music. When we hearken with our hearts tuned, we can hear the lamentations through time's corridor resounding. We can see revealed before us heroes, martyrs, saints, and scholars, loyal, steadfast children of Israel, sanctifying God. Kol Nidre. voice, chant of pain and chant of pathos, mingled with your notes of sorrow, vibrant measures trill and quiver, rising to a great crescendo with the Jew's undying spirit. As we lift aloft the Torah, symbol of our faith and vigor, notes of joyous exultation crept into your dirgeful music as with fortitude we cherished all our ancestors held most sacred. While our hearts beat to your rhythm, stir us with new consecration to God, to serve with all our heart and soul and fervor. Kol Nidre. chant of ages, chant of grief, and chant of triumph. Echoing this night of memories in the ears and heart of Israel, once again you draw together all dispersed and all God's faithful, to return and humbly seek. Faced by grim, appalling forces, do we plead before God's mercy for strength and help and guidance. With your plaintive chant, Kol Nidre, rise our prayers to heaven-ascending force or cease of human sorrow, for the dawn of peace and freedom, when hearts are purged of hatred, then all will stand together to acknowledge God. The entire congregation of the people Israel shall be forgiven, as well as the stranger who dwells among them, for all have erred. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of time and space, for granting us life, sustaining us, and bringing us to this moment. be seated. So you were standing for a long time, so you deserve a story. And in fact, in a moment, although only for a moment, we're going to be standing again for the bar food. So a story is sort of indispensable to the rhythm of the service so that you can sit for a moment before the Shema. And this story is about the Shema. Some of you have read, and those of you who haven't, I hope one day you will, one of the great works of human spirit, written by Viktor Frankl, called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a short book, and it is as beautiful and powerful a book almost as was ever written. And it's about Frankl's discovery of what's called logotherapy, where he discovered in his time in the camps, because he was in Auschwitz, that the most important variable for people to survive was whether they found meaning in the world and in their lives. Random chance could happen to anyone. Anybody could be shot. Anybody could be killed on the whim of a guard, but for those who day to day had to survive, it was only those who believed there was some meaning to all this that managed to endure. And Frankl had already been working on this theory before he was taken to the camps, and in fact, when he was taken from his home, he brought his PhD thesis with him, but of course, it was taken and thrown away and lost forever when he got to Auschwitz. And he mourned the loss of his thesis, and it seemed to him like everything he had worked for and everything that was important to him and everything that gave his life meaning had been taken away and tossed in the fire. And then the winter came. And he was not only starving, but he was freezing. And he was fortunate enough to get a coat from another prisoner, another inmate who had been killed. And as he wrapped himself in the coat, he put his hands in the pockets and he felt for a piece of paper. And when he pulled it out, the paper said on it, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And he thought to himself, everything that I expressed in the hundreds of pages of my thesis, this person found in 6 words. That the meaning of life can be in that simple prayer, in the sense of devotion to God and attachment to the Jewish people. And so when he left the camps, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, to teach us how many ways you can find meaning in a life, even in the most despairing and empty moments. Sometimes in only 6 words. Please rise on page 207 for the bar.
שוכבך וקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לתותחות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
We continue silently until paragraph before the end of the page.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Middle of page 210.
ומלכותו ורצון קיבלו עליהם, משה ובני ישראל, לפעלו שירה, נשאים ברם, ואמרו מפעלות עליהם אדוני, מפעלות עליהם הקודש, נורתנו עושריכם, ומלכותך רעומנך,
The Hashkivenu is the evening prayer for peace. Let's read it responsively in the English on page 211. Allow us, Adonai our God, to sleep peacefully and to awaken again to life, our sovereign. Shield us. Remove from us enemies and pestilence, swords, starvation, and sorrow. And remove the evil forces that surround us. Ensure our going and coming for life and peace now and forever. spreads the canopy of peace over us, over all the people of Israel, and over Jerusalem. On page 212 is a short blessing of Yom Kippur and the Kaddish, which is followed then by the silent Amidah. The silent Amidah contains the confessional, where we beat our hearts and confess to sins, some of which I trust we have not committed. But many we have. And I want to talk for a second about both why we beat our hearts and why we confess. First of all, in some ways, what we do is out of feel with where we are. When we read, as we just did, prayers or meditations about the difficult times in which we live, where starvation, sword, and sorrow, and we have just driven in from Beverly Hills in our new clothes for Yom Kippur, it seems discordant. And for the part of it that is discordant, of course, we should be enormously grateful, because we do live in circumstances that were almost unimaginable, or maybe literally unimaginable, to our ancestors. And we know that. And the fact that we read the same words is in some ways a tribute to where we came from and what we know others suffered before we were given the enormous privilege of being where we are. But there is another side to this, of course, which is that even though the conditions of life may have changed, the conditions of soul haven't. And when we beat our chests, what we are doing is awakening our hearts to the realities that not a day goes by that we don't commit some of the sins that we confess to so infrequently. There is not a day when we don't say things that we ought not to have said, that we don't thrust our hands in the heartstrings of someone else heedlessly and carelessly, when we aren't silent when we might have said something that would make someone's life better, when we didn't call and we know we should, when we do express anger and we know we shouldn't. And we tend to excuse ourselves because, after all, we're only human, until someone else treats us badly and we say, after all, I'm human. And if you take the prayer seriously, and after thousands of years they have earned the right to be taken seriously, then you recognize that in every life there is enormous room for growth, but it begins with acknowledging not only inside yourself but out loud all the ways in which we have not grown, all the cruelties that we practice, small though they may be, all the insensitivities that plague us, even though sometimes we are too insensitive to see them in ourselves. The Mahzor is a mirror. The prayer book reflects back to us who we are, even in ways we don't want to see. And part of the measure of the success of this day is how much you will find yourself in these words. Because if you go through the confessional thinking, this doesn't apply to me, then I promise you, it applies to you. Page 212. Silent Amidah, beginning on page 213 and concluding on page 221. Please rise as the ark is opened for Yahweh, page 223. Page 223.
They are all so
We want to thank Hannah Asher for a beautiful rendition of the Cantor, Yahweh. We continue on the top of page 225 with Hanashama. Page 229 at the top of the page, El Melech Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim, God who sits on a throne of mercy. page 233 at the top of the page, third line down. Bring us to your holy mountain, Havienu el har kodechecha, followed by Shema Kolenu. Since in some ways the forest is going to be instrumental in this talk, let's begin in the forest. The lion comes up to a badger and says, "Who's the king of the jungle?" And the badger says, "You are, lion." And the lion roars and says, "That's right." Comes up to a deer and says, "Who's the king of the jungle?" And the deer says, "You are, lion." And the lion roars and says, "That's right." Finds a small clearing and he sees an elephant. He comes up to the elephant. He says, "Who's the king of the jungle?" The elephant wraps the lion up in his trunk, smashes him against the tree, crushes him on the ground, steps on him, and starts to walk away. The lion says, "You don't have to be upset just because you didn't know the answer." I may be wrong, but I have a feeling tonight some people are going to be upset with me because I raised the question. If you are, just remember that I do not check my email on Yom Kippur. And after Yom Kippur, it'll be old news. But I'm going to talk about a difficult question, and tonight and tomorrow are wrapped together in one rubric, in a sense, that goes back to a story that was told of Lord Randolph Churchill, who was Winston Churchill's father. It is said of him that once he was at a dinner, and the British, being obsessed by lineage, or what we would call yichus, said to him, a woman sitting next to him said to him, "Tell me, whose descendant are you?" And he said to her, "Madam, I am not a descendant. I am an ancestor." Tonight I want to talk about what it is to be an ancestor to the world, and tomorrow what it is to be an ancestor to the Jewish people. Tonight, what do I owe the future as a human being? And there are endless ways to answer this question, but I want to focus on one, not only because it is critically important, but because I was encouraged to do so by my own descendant, my daughter Samara. And when she asked me, I thought of the poet Frost, who said, "When I was young, my teachers were the old. Now when I'm old, my teachers are the young. I go to school to youth to learn the future." Before I do, I want to implore you to listen to what I say, and not to what you assume I am saying. Because this is not, in my eyes, a political issue at all, although it has political dimensions, to be sure. But here goes. Here is the basic idea. Light from the sun passes through the atmosphere and is absorbed by the Earth's surface, and it warms the Earth. Greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide, act like a blanket. They trap that heat near the surface and raise the temperature of the Earth. It is a natural process. But human activities are increasing the amount of gases and trapping more heat. Now, greenhouse gases stay in the atmosphere for a very long time. Although plants and the ocean absorb carbon dioxide, we have been releasing so much that they can't keep up. So the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing all the time. Thus far, no debate. That is all unquestioned, and for that matter, unquestionable. Among the vast majority of scientists, there is absolute alarm. And when I say the vast majority, I mean NASA, the National Academy of Sciences, the Academy of Science in every developed country and some undeveloped countries, and repeatedly in surveys, 97% of climate scientists. Literally hundreds of Nobel Prize winners in science have signed letters to this effect. You cannot dismiss this without the consciousness that in the scientific community, the consensus is overwhelming, although it is not universal. Earlier this week, one of our members sent me a letter where 500 scientists had signed objecting not to the idea that there is global warming, because to that there can be no objection, but to the claims of the rapidity and severity of it. And I took a look at this letter, and I was particularly interested because it was signed by Freeman Dyson. Freeman Dyson is one of the world's leading scientists. He is at the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton, and he is very well known, though not as a climate scientist, and so I was interested that he had signed the letter, and I took the trouble to look up an interview with Freeman Dyson on climate science. And I'm going to quote to you, word for word, what he said in that interview. "My objections to the global warming propaganda are not so much over the technical facts, about which I do not know much, but rather against the way those people behave and the kind of intolerance to criticism that a lot of them have. I think that's what upsets me." With all due respect to Freeman Dyson, I think the technical facts matter a lot. And while none of us likes intolerance, intolerance kind of infects lots of fields, not only scientists. And so I ask myself, what is my responsibility as an ancestor and as a rabbi? You may recall several years ago that I encouraged the congregation to buy hybrid cars because I said, look, even if you think that pouring more CO2 into the atmosphere is a good idea, you still don't want to put money in the pockets of the enemies of Israel and the United States and the West. That's no longer a considerable issue because, as you know, most of our oil is no longer imported from the Middle East. But the question of what we are doing to our planet is still a question. And remember, when we say we're threatening the planet, we're not threatening the planet. We're threatening the things that live on the planet. That's the question. So what do you do? Because there are things that we can do that are indisputably good no matter how you view this question. Because pouring more carbon into the atmosphere is just a bad thing. So choosing a fuel-efficient car or a hybrid car or an electric car is just a good thing. Taking a bicycle, or God forbid, walking, it's a good thing. I know this. I walk to work every day. Okay, it's just across the street. I admit it. But still, I do. And the kind of car you drive is probably the biggest single contribution that you can make. But you can also buy energy-efficient appliances that use electricity and reduce your everyday electrical use by turning things off and unplugging things when you're not going to use them for a long time. Simple things, and they seem small. But there is a societal snowball effect. Remember how quickly smoking became anathema? Because we reached that famous tipping point where people just felt you shouldn't do this anymore, and all of a sudden, nobody was doing it. We use, as a world, 500 million plastic straws every year. That can't be good. It can't be good. Nobody says, no scientist that I have ever read says, you know what we need? More plastic. That's what we need. We know this. And please understand, and I insist on this is not a right or a left position, and I will prove it to you. Not only by the fact that many corporate CEOs are in the forefront of this fight because they know what the melting of the polar ice caps and the rising of the sea levels will do to their businesses, but also because we know we can't conserve our way out of this problem. It's going to require good old capitalist dynamism and innovation to make this better. And not only that, which I will return to in a moment, but what if I told you that it was possible for the right and the left to get together and to give a tax break to people who cut their CO2. Would you believe it? If you don't believe it, then I'm happy to tell you that it already happened in 2018. That Congress, on a bipartisan level, passed a bill to give a tax break to the tonnage of CO2 that is cut by corporations, and it was put together by the heads of oil and gas companies, by the right and the left. The society as a whole can do this if we don't make it a fight, if we make it a project. Let me give you one example. I'm not going to try to convince you all to become vegetarians. Not this year. I've been a vegetarian for about half my life. And I don't have an ethical objection to the idea of eating animals. That's not my problem, although factory farming is cruel, torturous. But here is a problem, a real problem. If cattle were their own nation, if they organized, they would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after China and the US. Not only because cattle naturally emit through regular anatomical processes greenhouse gas, but also because we feed them with other potential sources of food like maize or soy, and also because they need lots of water and fertilizers that release greenhouse gases, and lots of food and lots of land, many of which come from cleared forests. And I'm going to get back to that in a half a second when I tell you that that's why corporations are starting to produce things like Beyond Burgers and Impossible Meat. Because there is an innovative solution to problems of the environment as well. Because people recognize that there are lots of ways to approach this, and you don't have to get locked into that person is an alarmist and therefore none of it is true. Now, when I tell you, as I just did, that part of the problem with cattle is that you have to clear forests in many parts of the world in order for cattle to graze, I have a more discouraging statistic to tell you. Do you know how much of Amazon deforestation is because of cattle ranching? 80%. 80%. And we know the recent fires have already destroyed 17% of the Amazon, which is probably the most valuable piece of real estate for human survival in the world. In Brazil alone, there are 200 million head of cattle. 200 million. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of trees cleared. If you reduce the amount of meat you eat by 50%, you reduce your carbon footprint in your diet by 40%. You have to be a vegetarian. Give up a hamburger every now and then. This is serious. This matters. You know, I'm sure you have all, if you haven't, I'm happy to be the first one to tell you, know that beautiful story about Honi Amagal, Honi the circle drawer, who's walking along one day and he sees a man planting a carob tree. And he says to him, how long before that carob tree bears fruit? And the man says, 70 years. And Honi says to him, do you expect to be alive in 70 years? And the man says, no, but I was born into a world filled with carob trees. And as my ancestors planted for me, I plant for my descendants. We're doing the opposite. We are stealing trees from the future instead of planting them. We're cutting down forests that our children and our grandchildren will never benefit from. We're doing it heedlessly and thoughtlessly. When you cut down a fruit-bearing tree, the Midrash tells us there is a silent cry from one end of the world to the other. Our number one goal should be limiting the use of fossil fuels like oil, carbon, and natural gas and replacing them with renewable sources of energy. supporting companies that seek alternative energy solutions. There are places in the world right now, in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, where the cheapest way to heat your home is solar energy. There are lots of alternative possibilities. We should be working on them, promoting them. Maybe nuclear, I don't know. I did just watch Chernobyl. And so I'm not sure. And if you haven't watched it, just let me say it was really bad. It was really bad. If it weren't for 3 divers who went into the waters knowing they would die, half of Europe would be uninhabitable today. But here's the thing about watching Chernobyl. What struck me more than the scale of the disaster was the scale of the denial. Even after it was clear what was happening, people said, it's not happening. It's not happening, couldn't happen. Couldn't be, it's too terrible, couldn't be. But it was happening. And it was only some brave scientists who said, it is happening, that ended up preventing the greatest catastrophe in human history. This matters because we're custodians of the future. We are the ancestors, and we have to imagine what it would be if 97% of the climate scientists were right. We have to imagine it. Imagination is a moral quality. If you can't imagine the bad that would happen, then you will never be able to imagine the good you could do to repair it. The rabbis say, Kohelet Rabbah, that when God created Adam and Eve, he took Adam on a walk around the Garden of Eden and he showed him all the trees. And he said to Adam, Tein da'atcha, pay attention. When God says pay attention, he's going to say something important. Shelo tekalkel v'tachriv et olami, that you do not befoul and destroy my world. Because, says God, if you do, ein mi sheyitaken acharecha, there will be no one after you to fix it. No one. When our greatest prophet is a child, and in a basket by the river, Pharaoh's daughter comes to the river, and from Moses' cry, she says, Miyaldei ha'ivrim zeh, this is a Hebrew child. The great Israeli philosopher and scholar and sage Adin Steinsaltz says, what does it mean, this is a Hebrew child? How does she know that from the cry? And this is what he writes. He says, the Jewish soul weeps because the world weeps. Moses' cry is a universal cry. The Torah is advising us to hear the cry of children. The same Talmud tells us this is one of the legends that we put on the wall of every school, that the world rests on the breath of school children. But I remind you that is only true if the school children can breathe. On this Yom Kippur, let us recommit ourselves to be stewards of God's garden. On this Yom Kippur, let's be ancestors. Gemar Chatimat Torah. Our service on page 234 with Kianu Mameth. omniscient, we are sinful, you are merciful. Our days are a passing shadow, but you are one who truly is for time without end. Please rise for the Ashamnu, page 235. You know the mysteries of the universe, the deeper secrets of everyone alive. You probe our innermost depths, examine our thoughts and feelings. Nothing escapes you, nothing secret from you. Therefore, may it be your will, our God and God of our ancestors, to forgive our sins, pardon our iniquities, and grant us atonement for all our transgressions. Al-Chay, top of page 237.
על-חי שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל-חי שחטאנו לפניך ביודעים ובלא יודעים, על-חי שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות, ועל-חי שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח, ועל כולם אלוהינו אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך ותמהון לבד.
Please be seated. We continue on page 242. Page 242 at the bottom of the page. Rahmah. We turn to page 243 as the ark is opened, and we rise for Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu Cantor lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu ein manu melech ha'elat, Avinu Malkeinu asay Avinu Malkeinu hachazirenu b'tshuva shleima lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu shalach rufua shleima lechole onecha, Avinu Malkeinu zochrenu b'zikaron tov lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Omeinu, Besefer Hayim Tovim, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu
Kaddish Shalem, page 245. Again, the ark is open for the Aleinu, page 246. Page 246. Dear God, in love, we remember those who no longer walk this earth. We are grateful to you for the gift of their lives, for the joys we shared, and for the cherished memories that do not fade. I'd like to ask those who are in mourning and those who are observing the Yortzeit to please rise on page 247. Page 247 for Kaddish Aton, Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shmei Rabbah. The Alma, Tivrach, Tivute, the Amlif, Mavute, V'chayefon, Uvyomefon, V'chayei, Dechol Beit Yisrael, V'hakala, U'vizman, Karif, V'yimru, V'hei Shmei Rabba, Mevarach, V'yalam, V'omei Amen. V'yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpahar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalach, Shmei Kedusha, Le'ila, Le'ila, M'kol birchata, v'shirata, Yushvechata, v'nechemata, Da'amiran v'yalma, v'yimru, Yehei Shlama, Lavan, Yin Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, v'yal kol Yisrael, v'yimru, V'oseh Shalom, v'yimrucha, U'yaseh Shalom. Aleinu v'al Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. May God grant peace and comfort and healing to the hearts of all who mourn. And let us all say, Amen. A word about tomorrow. First of all, the question that I don't like to answer, which is when's sermon in the Yizkor. I will just tell you, if you are here before 11 and after and no later than, let's see, I would say it will certainly be after 11 and before 1:30. I'm trying to figure out how long I can get you to stay here for. Honestly, if you get here by noon, you'll probably be okay too, but I don't want to say that. Because I remember my father used to say every year, he would say to me, one year I'm going to do the Yizkor sermon in the morning, and everyone's going to come and they're going to say, what happened? And he will say, it's all you'll miss, by the way, if you come later, are prayers. Just prayers. Also, those of you who want to know when shofar blowing is, the Eilah service, the final service, will begin at about 6, and we will blow the shofar at 7:15. So you can plan appropriately. Also, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, in a new program, Rabbi Artson is going to be meeting with singles on Pilot Plaza. So those of you who are singles or have singles or no singles, please invite them to meet during the break at 3 o'clock with Rabbi Artson on Pilot Plaza. It is too difficult to thank everybody, and I don't want to belabor this or make it like an Oscar speech. And to thank everybody who makes not only the high holidays, but all year at Sinai so wonderful. But I do want to thank our Cantor, Feldman, our choir director, Organist Aryell Cohen, and the choir, the other clergy, Rabbis Guzik and Sherman and Rotenberg, as well as Rabbi Rosenthal, and our cantorial intern, David Childs, Rebecca in my office, who is, I call her the indispensable Rebecca, and those of you who have spoken to her in my office will know why. And Judy and Rachel Ann Levy, Judy Bagan, Rebecca Davenport, all of them wonderful. And of course, our executive director, Howard Lessner, who for many years has made this a warm, welcoming, also a clean and efficient place. And to all of them, and many, many, many more, we are very, very grateful, including, of course, head of our religious school, Danielle Casson, and also Betty Wynn, our interim director of Sinai Akiva. And also, I'm very grateful to Jamie Berman, who is our new president of Sinai Temple, and it is my pleasure to call her to the bima now. Jamie Berman.
Thank you, Rabbi Wolpe. You took some of my thank yous. Thank you also to Cantor Feldman, our organist and choir director, Aryell Cohen, and our choir for these inspirational services. A very special thank you to our High Holy Day Honors team who came out of retirement this year to assist us. Joel Weinstein, David Matlube, and Richard Weston took on the monumental task to coordinate all the honors and all the comings and goings on the bima. Thank you to Daniel Delshad and Shervin Rashti and our dear Mansour Eslamboli for Torah Gabbai. You are all congregants of our Sinai community, and we are so grateful for your membership. Our lay leadership is constantly evaluating the age-old question of what do you as a congregant get with your membership, and does it make a difference in your life? To paraphrase a dear friend, Rabbi Paul Kipnis, it depends. Does it make a difference if you mean physically? It won't. Join a gym. If you mean richer, it won't. Get a higher paying job. If you mean more physically beautiful, it won't. Go get a makeover. And I could go on. Being a member of our Sinai community means being a part of a larger community of your people. Teaching future generations that being a Jew matters. That you always have a place to turn when you are in need. That you have a spiritual home. It means that you have a place to go to chant Misha Berach when you or someone you know is in pain. It means that Israel has an advocate in your community, that there will always be a Shabbat and high holiday services for you and the community. Our Sinai community can make you feel more beautiful because you feel better about yourself when you are spiritually centered. You will feel richer because you will have enriched your life and those of others. You will feel smarter because you will be able to partake in 5,000 years of Jewish knowledge. You will be more at peace because you will have adjusted the balance of the mind, body, and spirit. So as they say, phone a friend and share the ruach of our community. We wish you and your family a Gemar Hatima Tova and an easy fast.
The Cantor and I are going to be receding. I guess if it's a recessional, we're receding. Yes? We will be receding. Actually, we'll just be walking, but we're going to be walking in a receding manner so that we can greet you as you leave. And we conclude our service with Adon Olam, page 249.